Welcome to the Festival of Storytellers. I thank everybody that's involved with this process, because we know writers need readers and writers need publishers.
Experience is not about the publisher, it is about us, the authors.
Am I on the stage now? Perhaps I am. I hope. I'll get started talking, I guess. I'm promoting a book that's about democracy, a rather important subject, especially these days, when we seem to be losing our ability to encourage and affect change in our community and our world. And my book's called You Can Control Your Government. Makes sense. It's how to restore real democracy to the citizen. And the way it's done is by way of what are called referendums. Now, these referendums are not used very often in either the States or Canada. Certainly in Canada, they're not. 24 states use them occasionally, quite effectively, actually. But they can be done more. They're certainly not done federally there. And an example of just how they can be used, despite what you might think that what's the citizen to do and how does he know what's right or wrong? Well, there's lots of common sense among you and us that can be implemented by way of referenda. Timothy Moffat, greetings, Richard. Good for you, Timothy. You look young and energetic and should get this book and try to encourage your representative to implement the means of establishing democracy via referendum. It's a means that is used very, very effectively in a very complicated country. Switzerland is the best example that I know of. I've been all over the world, and I've been to Switzerland many times and have been tremendously impressed by their ability to affect change and do things correctly and effectively. And we should do it too, do it better by way of referendums. A referendum is a question which asks the public an opinion about, not just an opinion, a decision. And if the majority of those who sign the petition after it's been determined the wording, then this decision becomes law. And it's therefore a very democratic way of effecting changes within your community that need to be done. It's established in the book very carefully. There are lots of questions answered in different areas of involvement. Certainly, the methods used in Switzerland are the ones that I really encourage because they work. Anything you know about Switzerland, you think, my goodness, why is it such an effective, rich, democratic area? I'm getting lots of greetings, and good to know that people are listening. The West Coast, California, utilizes referenda relatively effectively. It's got some nuances that could be improved upon for sure, but at least they do utilize referenda often. So does some other 20 states. And I would like to think that you people that are listening and can get this book and read it. It's simple. It's only 100 pages, very carefully worded to describe how it works, where it works, the sorts of questions that can be effectively answered. And it does just pull upon our basic desire to see that democracy works and that it's involving us and that we get things done as a result of majority opinion, not just the opinion of a representative, for example, that we elect for 4 years. How can we influence him or her? In no way is it possible. But if you have referendums, the decisions can be determined by the public that vote on them. There are just some governments that you can't control. Well, this is why it's important that we get together and get our representative to implement, to put into place in our laws, referendums, the idea that you can utilize them and that the decisions are binding. That can be part of the makeup of our community, our city, our province, our canton, our state, our federal government. These are things that the citizens can effectuate to make sure that things are working correctly and well. What the majority of the citizens want to see happen. And you might think it's difficult, and well, it is difficult. You need to, of course, get, first of all, the representative to encourages others, representatives, to pass the law permitting them. Once that's done, then the details have to be established. You get a personage or an administrator, a certain number of them, that would approve the wording to make sure it's not offensive and that it fits the jurisdiction that is being requested an answer from. And then you have a certain number of days to get it's not just everybody's opinion that it has to go on a referendum. You have to get a certain number of people, depending on the jurisdiction, 1,000 maybe, to sign a form agreeing to have this decision made by the general public. These are details which would be established when you incorporate the terms of the referendum law into place. And when you do that, as it's been done so effectively in Switzerland for hundreds of years, then you'll see that things improve and that you'll feel more comfortable about living in a state or an area where the majority of citizenry opinion prevails, not that of some bossy representative or bossy isn't necessarily the right word, but one that thinks he knows a lot more than anybody else. And no doubt that is not the case. We have in a democracy, it's the opinion of the majority of the electors on the issues that should prevail. That's what democracy is all about. But we don't have that very often. This book describes it very closely. You can get it from Amazon or Barnes and Noble, and it's pretty inexpensive. It's only 100 pages. But it describes how carefully and clearly and effectively it can run. Now, you say that Switzerland has a more robust, yes, democratic system. They're more inclined to participation. That's because they have it. They are more inclined to participate because we have such a system going. So it does require us to implement the law permitting it, as they did there many, many years ago. And that changes periodically if issues come up that aren't operating effectively. But we don't generally have any form of referenda. And if we do, it's certainly not something that is very often altered or improved upon. Do you think we could still steer the ship to its correct course? Well, it's not being done by me alone. It's done by you and your friends. And you have to get your elect to start with. You have to get it as a part of the rules of your jurisdiction, of your area. That can be done as a result of people persuading their representative that this is what will work better. Now, he's going to be initially probably defensive and opposed because fundamentally it reduces his power, which you want, but he doesn't. But he should be able to be encouraged to think that, yeah, this is a better way of running things and I would like to be a part of it. And he should be able to persuade his fellow electorate to institute it as a law. Yeah, and the younger generation might be more cognizant about the importance of democracy, but not necessarily. Where us older people are aware of what goes on. We're maybe not as ultimately affected, obviously, by what comes up in the few years left in our life, whereas the young people have many years to be concerned about. But it also requires them to be aware of it. Now, what's happening in Texas, and I don't know what's happening in Texas. That's not an area that I happen to be familiar with, but I'm sure many aspects are not being run properly there, just as other states. And they ought to be. And this people in the Texas and in the state and in the cities in the country are the ones that can change things. You have to be aware that as we have things now, it's the representative that persuades his fellow representatives to have a law passed. And we have the problem, you guys, especially between Republicans and Democrats, which is so horrible to think about. It's hardly the least wise Democratic. But at any rate, that's what you've got. So you've got to get the majority of those that are elected in whatever state it is to pass the laws that implement referenda. And you got to know just how it works so you can persuade them. And it's an idea that is nothing new. It's not a new thing, believe it or not. Referendums in Switzerland have been used for years. They're no better as citizens, as people, than we are. Maybe they oughtn't to be nearly as good because they have so many complications in their manner of running their country. For example, they have 4 official languages. Doesn't that complicate things? And they're surrounded by 4 huge countries. How does that complicate your ability to pull things together well? They're not on the ocean. They have no resources to utilize, mining or that sort of thing to pull wealth out of the ground. They've done it themselves, implemented the sorts of businesses, the sorts of operations, and even, of course, farming, anything. It's done effectively and well as a result of a few years of knowledge of how to run things. So democracy means that the people run the show, doesn't it? That's the way it's supposed to be. It's the majority of people that should be deciding things. We don't have much of a democracy. We decide the people that run it, at least, which is better than an autocracy, where somebody gets to think that he can alone or she run the show. And there's lots of parts of the world that are run that way, which is certainly worse even than ours. But ours can be greatly improved upon. And the referendum is the method of doing it. So I hope that people listening to all of this will recognize that to improve their community, they need to try to find a way to have referendums able to be implemented. And that you can contact your representative. He might, as I've said, a representative doesn't really like referendums because it means maybe he'll try to pass a law which the majority of his citizens don't like, and they will refute it. How? By implementing a law, a question that will change what that representative thought was right. And that's the way it should be. It should be the majority of people that decide these things. And it's very true that we neglect our democracy a great deal in not having referendums commonly used in our communities. And it works. That's the other thing. The majority rules, and the majority opinions are what a democracy should expect a way to run things. It should be from that opinion that the rule is designed. We don't follow that, and we haven't for a long time. Although, as you know, some states do utilize referenda fairly well. It should be more widely used. It should be used federally, as I've intimated. And reading the book, it's simple, short, cheap, and sets all this out very clearly. I think you'll like the book. It doesn't take long to read, and it gives you lots of thought. Hopefully, you'll see to it that in a few years, it might take 3 or 4 to get the representatives to make a decision that will enable referenda to be utilized effectively. So keep at it, read it, encourage your representative, and there's many, many issues that could be greatly improved upon if the majority of the public had opportunity to vote upon them. It's not simple. You can't just anybody get a point of view through. You got to have a fair number of people sign the petition to show their interest. And you have to have a small administration that will say, yeah, the wording is okay and the jurisdiction is okay. And there we have the governor saying no to the federal government. Well, that doesn't sound like it ought to be done that way. And if it's within the jurisdiction of the federal government to do things, then they ought to be able to. But you do get individuals that, like your man in Texas, I guess, who's very strongly opinionated, thinks he knows what's going on and what's correct, and will try to have the authority to see that it's done his way, not your way, but his way. It's not democratic, not at all. So you have time, lots of time. 4 years will happen, and before you know it, it'll be over. A new administration comes into effect, and it could well be that in different states of the states that, as a result of you guys that are listening here, encouraging your representative to implement referendums, and so that your state and your city, it can be citywide, obviously, too. And there are rules that have to be implemented to make sure that it doesn't undo things that are being done properly now, of which there must be a few things, many things. But the questions have to be well worded, and they have to be those that can be understood and would fit within the jurisdiction of the area that is being asked to decide upon the issue. So I hope that people will look up this book and will think more about how they can involve themselves and others in the community in doing things better and in doing things so that we're not ultimately taken over by ultra strong representatives that seem to not know what's right, or seem to think they know what's right and cause trouble as a result of their fixed point of view. So, as I've mentioned, obviously, get the book. You can control your government, and it's how to restore real democracy to the citizen, which is important, a very important aspect of the continuing of our society. We want a society that works and that's democratic, that follows rules, and so that we can work together and do things together and do things effectively, and that will see to it that our kids have a community, a society that is run well. They are what we're all anxious to work towards, and we want that to happen. Certainly, this book will describe a lot of things that you may not have thought about, and that it could be easily implemented. And that, as I say, there's a perfect example of how it's all the state, the country, the canton, as they call it, the city, the cities, and the areas are run well. And if they're not, up comes a referendum which tries to bring things back under control, and often does, as a result of the majority of the citizenry wanting it, which is what democracy is all about. So I hope you will follow the ideas set out in the book. It's short, simple, You can get it from Amazon now for virtually nothing, and you can get it in Kindle form. It's simple, inexpensive. You should think about these things. Try to improve your community. I'm sure you all do want to improve it, and many of you in more forceful ways than others, but you don't have to be a forceful person to get involved in signing in a question which is asked of you every 4 years or so. And you can involve yourself in a big way in improving your community. Well, I think world governments. Now, I'm not sure about world governments. That's an interesting issue. How do you get the whole citizenry of the world? That's not within my aegis of understanding. But world governments don't have a lot of power, and but they are the representatives from countries that send them there, and there's usually enough people involved in the government or the world government to establish effectively results of improvement of avoiding of crises and avoiding of wars. Huh. That's a tough issue, but and I don't know that Switzerland is a particularly good example in that respect. It just does things on within its realm, within its territory, very effectively, as should and could be done in the territories of other countries. So that's the idea those are the ideas that come from the book. And this marking on what's on a ballot and marking a piece of paper, as democracy can be a hassle. But if it is an issue that you yourself knows about and would like to have a view listened to, then this is how referendums work. It doesn't involve a lot of difficulty. You have to think about the issue, and you can ask others what they think, obviously. But when it is an important issue, surely the majority of people should be interested in having a say in it. That's the part that we're missing. We don't have a say, any say. We should. So get your referendums going in your communities and follow it up and get your representative to allow them in the first place. And then you'll see great improvements slowly happening in the way things are run. And they just look at Switzerland as an example of how very complicated area does it. And surely they have some issues that go up there that they sort of wish that hadn't had to make an opinion upon. But that's part of the life we live in. It's a complicated world. But we should have a part to play in it. And we do, if you get utilizing referendums in any realistic manner. So speak about it, read about it, utilize it, employ it, pass the laws that permit it, and you'll find that things work better. And that's surely something we all want, is to see things working better in our community. So those are what I guess I'm supposed to be talking about, and I have been for the last half hour. I do wish you good luck in following through. It's a simple book to read. It covers more than I've been able to tell you in a few minutes. But it also gives you time to think about it. It's not just somebody like me talking about it. If you read about it, it would encourage you a little bit more to understand the nuances and why it works in certain areas and hasn't been employed in all others and should be in your area, wherever you may be. So thank you. Thank me for my wise words. Well, that's nice of him. Thanks, Bob, for that comment. It's hopefully lots of other people will follow through with what the book encourages, and that you'll get a better community as a result. Things will work better and you'll enjoy life more. Thanks a lot.